Hey, what's up, guys? It is Dan from FightWave, and today I'm joined by somebody who I'm very excited to speak with. If you know anything about me, you know I love fighters that are inherently themselves, and this fighter is no exception. Somebody who I think a lot of fighters could take notes from just in being themselves and being authentic, as authenticity oftentimes is a very big thing for people. And today I'm joined by none other than fan favorite and UFC lightweight Jordan Leavitt, who is in costume for us today, ladies and gentlemen. How are we doing today with the Monkey King? How are we doing, Jordan?
I'm doing good. How are you guys? How are you doing, man?
I'm doing phenomenal, man. And first and foremost, obviously, thank you so much for your time. I know you're oftentimes like to dial back a little bit, just take a break from everything and all the chaos that unfolds in the life of a fighter. Just talk to me, obviously, about how you've been and how you've just been killing your time recently.
I've just been training and reading. Well, it's training as much as I can. I'm coming off an injury and just reading and being the dad. And yeah, I'm kind of getting back into it the last 3 weeks, getting back into full training schedule, hoping for something either end of the year or early next year. And yeah, I'm just making sure I'm improving every day, and that's the journey. So.
No, yeah, definitely. And Jordan, I have to speak for myself and I think all fans when we say that, obviously dealing with an injury right now, but you started the year off incredibly hot and I think put a lot of doubters to rest because people were talking bad about you after your last performances. Obviously, unfortunately, in our fight game, people have recency biases, but you came out and you quickly eliminated all doubt with a phenomenal performance over Victor Martinez. Talk to me just about obviously what it meant for you to just kind of erase all doubt and go in there and put on, I think, arguably your strongest performance to date in the young career that you've had thus far. So talk to me about that just a little bit.
Yeah, that the Victor Martinez fight was very important for me because I've always had like this performance block when it comes to striking, like when the lights are on. Like anyone that trains with me will always talk about how I'm very well rounded, but like I was just telling myself that entire camp, and I was like, I'm gonna try to smite him, but I'm definitely going to outstrike him. Like that's the goal. I don't care if I land one punch and he lands zero. I'm going to outstrike him. I have to do it for me. So I was like talking in interviews. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna knock him out. Like trying to get myself psyched up, not really believing it. And coming off a loss like last July, I was like, I really need to like kind of erase the memory, like in the fighting zeitgeist about that fight. And then I came in and I kind of changed the narrative surrounding me as like a grappling specialist because I'm now 4-2 in the UFC with 2 knockouts, and that's pretty excited for me because I had none of them, no knockouts until I got here. So yeah, I'm just evolving and growing. I'm still pretty young in this sport, and I'm very happy that I was able to get a nice, vicious-looking knockout. So.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think the performance speaks to a lot about your evolution as a fighter, but also the mindset that you have. Because I think in the world of fighting, truly the fighters are the strongest minded people. And I think all of us are just obviously a spectator to the willpower and the mentality that you guys possess going into that octagon. After the Paddy Pimblett fight, obviously, the internet being the internet, fight fans can be very vicious and cruel at times. Me and myself and you know all too well about that. But I think your mindset kind of coming out of it and more or less not letting it bother you, it really spoke volumes to me because you're kind of just this great example of what, like, the definition, in my opinion, and it's ironic because you love reading, it's don't judge a book by its cover because I think in our sport especially, there's a lot of preconceived notions surrounding the fighters, but when you truly hear the fighters speak and, get to really open up, you really get a different lens into it. How does it feel kind of just, obviously kind of almost over a year removed from that bout, just looking back on that time, the mindset from then to now and just being able to obviously be more comfortable within the state of fighting and within the world of fighting and not letting the fans, words kind of get to you. Because you mentioned in another interview, the world of social media, it's more often the spectacle nowadays. And, now you've just kind of shown that, really you're just yourself and you're able to move forward despite anything that's thrown your way.
Yeah, like I've learned a lot about like myself like the past year and about what matters and what doesn't matter. And I think it helps that I like to think I'm like a humorous person. I view things in a very like casual and funny way. And I lead with foolishness. I'm always twerking and doing stupid stuff. So when people make the memes about me, so I actually really like that. I feel like it really helped me cope with like the loss. And also just like my mindset as a fighter, I always walked into a fight and I was like, how am I going to take this person down and submit them? And I was like pigeonholing my tactics, like in my mind. I was screwing with my mind before I'd even walk out there, as opposed to when I spar with people, 20 rounds a week, every week for the past 10 years. I'm not thinking like, oh, how am I going to submit this person? I start every round one out, like one punch at a time, and you try to find ways to win the fight and to win that round. But whenever I go into the like when the bright lights were on, I was always going out there. I'm like, how am I going to submit this person? I'm like, Paddy Pimblett hasn't been submitted in 10 years. How am I going to be the person to do it? When in reality, I should have just gone out there and fight and like, I don't want to say go out there without a game plan, but not have such a narrow focus with my game plan. And just the last fight, I was very proud of myself because I fought Victor Martinez, who was a guy with no submissions, all decision to knockout wins. And I went out there, I wasn't able to do my plan A, and I was able to knock people out. And very quickly, all the people with Islam Makhachev or Paddy Pimblett as a profile picture, they stopped annoying me. You know, like they stopped messaging me things and making fun of me. And that's just like social media world isn't real. It's all very fickle and it all follows like currents and like the things that are happening right now. And right now, I'm just a person off a knockout win. So the attention's pretty good.
No, yeah, like I agree with you where you said that. Obviously, the Islam Makhachev and Paddy Pimblett profile picture people, you and I know them all too well, unfortunately. But I think one thing that stands out to me about you is you've never shied away, and like you mentioned, you've never shied away from being yourself. You've never painted a picture false of who you are, and I think you've really been kind of a focal point in cementing that, you know, fighters are really just normal people. You know, fighters are all different in their own specific ways. You know, you've not shied away from obviously just being yourself, and some people obviously like to criticize that or like paint a picture of what a fighter looks like or what a fighter should be, and you've very clearly and effectively shown that not every fighter is going to look the same. Truly, it's a matter of skill set, not a matter of how they look or how they appear, and shown that skill beats any, you know, preconceived visual of a fighter. And that's what really resonates with me for you, because you've showcased, you know, obviously your love for books, your love for video games, your love for just the mysterious parts of this world, and you've showcased, you know, interesting stuff that people don't associate with fighters, and really shown that it is okay to like these things, it is okay to do these things, and it doesn't matter what people say, because ultimately it's not on the people to judge you, it's on you to be critical of yourself, and you've been very loving of yourself. And just that, talk to me just about obviously being able to showcase your interests, be very prideful of who you are in the octagon, and not letting these voices and these haters kind of deter you from being yourself, you know, with either the stuff that people say, oh, it's overly flamboyant or all these crazy things. You've just not shown any damn, and I honestly commend you for that. I think it's phenomenal. We need more of it in this sport.
Thank you for that. It has to be noted, so when I was coming up, when I was 18, I was at Syndicate, and I was around a lot of UFC fighters, but there's one fighter in particular that really, like, kind of gave me, like, more courage, and that was Roxanne Modafferi. And she was always herself. And I remember, and like, as I was coming up through the ranks and coming up through the regional scene, I was like always like in contemplation about like, how am I going to make sure like this sport doesn't like chew me up and spit me out? And a lot of fighters have like two general strategies. They either create like this fighter's alter ego, and that way it's not me, it's just like person I am when the lights are on, and I go out there and I win, and if I lose, they're not insulting me. They don't really know me. They're insulting the mask I wear when the lights are on. Or like I could just try to like live a life of like extreme vulnerability and extreme honesty. And I can go out there. I'm always vulnerable. People are always knowing what I want to do, always knowing like how I view things, what I think about things. And it's like when you can look at yourself in the mirror and not be embarrassed by any blemish or any scar or any like weird thing about you, then other people pointing those things out aren't going to bug you. So I walk out there and I'm unapologetically myself. And I don't plan half the dumb and stupid, cringy, silly things I do. But, you know, I go out there, I do what I'm feeling, and I don't have any regrets. With like the cameras are on me when I'm fighting, I feel like I'm always myself. And I feel like fighting's a very expressive art where I get to show like what I'm made of. And I don't want to go through it. I don't want to go through the most like, interesting, unique, exciting thing about my life with a mask on, pretending to be somebody else. A lot of fighters could do that, but I plan on being here for a long time and a good time. And I want to be the same person going out that I was going in. So,
Absolutely. And I think more or less having that sense of identity in the octagon and it being the focal point of who you are, it would be kind of almost upsetting to kind of step away from who you are in the biggest point of your life and the biggest identifier of who you are as a person. But I think more importantly, what I love about you is you step away from even the fighting. You're not afraid to showcase other interests or other passions that people may deem, oh, non-fighter. Like I think you are very much so somebody who you showcase your passions with pride and things that you love. And one thing I love about you is you're just your love for literature. I think that in terms of reading, you're probably the most avid reader that is a fighter that I know, because and your open love for books, I think it pays dividends in who you are as a fighter, because it gives you a lot more perspective, I think, when you have such an immense access of books. I wanted to ask you, just because I know you also at a time, if I correct me if I'm wrong, you were actually going to school for political science, which obviously is a phenomenal accomplishment, and I want to commend you for that also. Talk to me about just what literature has done for you, as a person, as a competitor going into that octagon. What has it meant for you just to have an access and, an immense, I guess, not collection of books, but just an immense disposal of books at your service that you can just look to when you need some wisdom, or when you just need to get your mind away from all the chaos that fighting brings with it?
Yeah, reading and stories in general are just the ways throughout human history we've always transmitted values. We've expressed ourselves. We expressed and transmitted ideas. And I'm in a very weird, unique situation that I accomplished my dreams very young in life. But the person who reads lives, the person who never reads only lives one life. The person that reads many books lives many lives. And just storytelling in general is a very important part of the human experience. And when I walk out into the cage and I'm on this stage, I'm telling a story, and there's morals and lessons you could learn from that story, and it's subjected to everyone that is able to watch the story unfold. And when I was in political science, one thing that interested me is when I was working on political campaigns, every candidate had a story, and it was, how are we going to frame this story in a way that makes people like you, or makes people resonates with other people? And when I fight, I just try to make sure that my story is as unadulterated, as pure as I want it to be. I don't want anyone to tell me their theory about, why does Jordan do this? I tell you why I do this. Why does Jordan have this nickname? I tell you why I have this nickname. Because at the end of the day, we don't get to control what people say about how we live our lives. We get to control the story we put out there, and we get to decide what people see, and that kind of influences how they're going to, what lessons and what morals are going to take from the way you live your life. So stories are just very important to me and very formative to me.
I mean, I absolutely agree there, Jordan. I think for me, I think a place where I agree with you, and I think we relate very strongly, is our love for video games. We were talking, I think, in the DMs quite some time ago, talking about obviously your favorite video games. You mentioned a masterpiece of a trilogy in the form of Mass Effect, and my hat's off to you. I mean, probably the best video game that I've seen referenced by a fighter ever, the Mass Effect trilogy. Although EA is a little bit of a mess right now, Mass Effect right now, in my opinion, hands down one of the best, arguably I should say, one of the best stories out there ever produced by a video game publisher. And I wanted to ask you, obviously, what does it mean to you to have that, a part of your upbringing, just such a strong story that you can look to as a fan of the video games, and also just in your pursuit of telling your own story? What does the video game of Mass Effect mean to you?
Catharsis. I love when you play a good game, or you read a good book, and then everything is tied off in a way. Maybe it's not what you wanted, but it all makes sense, and it gives you a sense of that's right, that's how it's supposed to go. And I feel oftentimes one of the dark things about this sport is that a lot of the athletes we love, they leave the sport too late, and it takes away our sense of catharsis when we watch their career unfold. And for me, when I enter the sport, I want to make sure the story ends when the story's supposed to end. For me, when I lost to Patty, and I was were you depressed? Yeah, a little depressed. Half a paycheck's half a paycheck. But the story doesn't end there. The story ends there. It's a tragedy. I get to decide when the story ends, and I plan on ending it on a high point. I plan on ending it with lots of twists and turns in the plot, and I want it to be a beautiful, cathartic experience for myself and for the people that watch the story unfold. So Mass Effect, beautiful trilogy. And it ends in a way that pisses off a lot of people, but it makes sense with the themes of that the games are trying to tell. And for me, I just want the themes to be consistent throughout my life, just like it's consistent in any good video game, any good movie, any good book. So,
I mean, that's a beautiful answer, Jordan. I think I agree there wholeheartedly. For me, that's a very similar experience for me. And I think ultimately, you get to decide when your story ends. So when you're watching every fighter, you're essentially watching a storyline unfold with twists and turns. And, whenever they retire, that story comes to an end in the fighting sense. But in the world sense, it's only just beginning. I think obviously a big focal point and a reason why I do these interviews is because I like to see more about the fighter themselves. What are the people like behind the fighter? Not necessarily just the fighters themselves and what they do in the octagon. And I think we truly get that from you, with your sense of vulnerability. You're very open, you're very personable. A lot of these things, I think, gravitate more fight fans towards you. And I think that level of authenticity is something we need a little more of. So I think a phenomenal answer there. And I think something that prompts maybe a possible, playthrough of Mass Effect very soon for both of us. And, just more importantly, I like the ups and downs that you mentioned, because I think when you started your career, obviously you came out hot, and then you get into the UFC, and I think probably the most unreal effect and kind of a chaos, kind of a little bit of chaotic effect for you was obviously the Matt Wiman knockout. I think it goes without saying that that was probably one of the more kind of you can't foresee things that happened in your career. But I think it changed you a lot in terms of perspective. Am I correct in saying that a little bit? Like, just in terms of the perspective of the sport, maybe that shifted it a little bit in terms of, the knockout happened. It was a very unexpected turn of events. And then you came out a completely different fighter after that fight and looked improved in multiple regards, but also very different in terms of how you kind of move forward with the sport. Because coming into that fight, you mentioned collecting food stamps and using food stamps to getting a 50K bonus. That fight changed your life in more ways than one. Talk to me just about the impact of that fight and what it means to look back on, probably one of the more chaotic points in your fighting career in terms of just fan craziness and just, everything that transpired.
Yeah, that fight was very formative to me because it was no longer like just a fun game, fun dream for me. I went from being like a nobody of like 6,000 followers with no knockouts, like a wannabe UFC fighter, to in 22 seconds being a UFC fighter with a viral knockout with like 20 something thousand followers. And then looking up to Matt Wiman for many years, even one of the first fighters I was a fan of. And then being like his retirement fight really put things into perspective for me. Like my career was beginning and his career was ending. And it's a very high point for me, but on the flip side, it was an incredibly low point for him and for his family. And so for me, like I couldn't watch that knockout for like almost a year. Like I never watched it because it had all this negative emotional baggage for me, and I felt guilty. And I'm getting past that. I'm getting past that because it's the hurt business and everything, and they're not hurt nearly as much as it seems. But for me, that fight was very important because it brought to mind all the consequences that there can be. What happens if you hold on to the sport too long? Do you really want to go out on your shield? Like all these things that like, oh, the fighter should want to do this, and it's like, I don't want to go out on my shield. I want to be like, I take the coward's way out, but like, I don't want to go out like on a fight night, my wife in my corner, to some young upstart. That's not a good story. I don't want that story to be mine. And I'm thankful for Matt Wiman's career, his influence on my style. But it was a blessing to go from food stamps to 50K. Government didn't want to take care of me anymore. But, there's always a price you pay for great things that happen. And I think I paid that price in terms of like emotional baggage.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think like I asked that because I think it's a very transformative experience because it's very reminiscent of Uriah Hall's knockout on The Ultimate Fighter, where you truly find out what this sport kind of entails while being a practitioner within it. And I think for the better or for worse, it transforms a fighter and brings them to a new level of understanding within our sport to a point where I think only a few other things could. And I think one thing that for me stands out to you is even just a transformative life experience in the form of becoming a father. I think that really changes your perspective on the sport as well. And I wanted to ask you just how maybe that's shifted your perspective, from being a father in the UFC fighting now and also just from not being a father when you were fighting coming up.
Yeah, like the birth of my daughter really changed a lot of things about me. And I always planned on being a family man. I always planned on getting married relatively young and starting a family and not being old at graduation, all those things. But a lot of times when a fighter has their first child, it's a make or break like thing that happens to them. Oftentimes fighters aren't the same after they have a child because children have a way of like covering up a lot of the hurts you had growing up. You know, oftentimes I feel like when we're around children, like we grow up to be the adults we wanted when we were children. And very well adjusted, not hurt adults don't go into this sport. So when something comes along and it changes your life and it smooths out all the rough edges, like, are you still the same person? And I was worried about that a little bit. But when I saw my daughter, because when she was born, she was in the NICU. So like she was first born, it was like a tumultuous like thing. And I was like, no, I'm a fighter. I gotta fight for this little girl. And that's more important. And it like brought a sense of focus and a sense of purpose to my training. And you know, like I love my fighting, I love my wife, I would do anything to support her. I would do anything for my daughter. You know, I would cause any sort of pain in the octagon, I would suffer anything, you know, just to make sure she doesn't go without. And for me, I think being a father definitely made me more vicious, a more dangerous fighter because, you know, like I'm a papa bear now. You gotta protect your family, and like my daughter's my legacy. And even if you take like I'm religious, but say you take all like faith, everything out of life, like at worst, at the end of your life, your memories for your children. And I just want to be a good story for her to look back on. And I want her to be informed by like my life and like the story that I'm living out. So yeah, I'm motivated to do everything right because of that.
I mean, that's absolutely touching and just beautifully put, I should say. And you know, Jordan, I relate a lot to you, and I think your story resonates with me a lot because coming up, you know, there was that hesitancy to flush out a little bit of myself and showcase a little bit of myself. And I think through combat sports, I found myself same way that you found your purpose through combat sports. And you know, inherently just being ourselves. At the end of the day, I think that authenticity and that level of storytelling that you convey for other people is indicative of the legacy that you leave behind. And I think thus far you've left a remarkable legacy in the Octagon, not just in being yourself, but inspiring people like me coming up and doing our thing in any regard of life, you know, whether it's being a content creator, whether it's being someone who covers the sport, or whether it's someone just going to school. I think what you've conveyed in probably one of the most vicious sports in terms of fan base and in terms of people within it is inspiring, and I wanted to thank you for that first and foremost, and then also give flowers where flowers is due because I think you don't get enough respect for what you've accomplished already. Obviously, 4-2 in the UFC with great wins over guys like Matt Wyman, Trey Ogden, and Victor Martinez. The story of the Monkey King is only yet to begin. You mentioned you were nursing a little bit of injuries and, you know, obviously hoping to get back by the end of the year. But what are some personal goals that you have? You know, maybe whether it's reading X amount of books or, you know, maybe playing a video game or doing a couple things. You know, what are some milestones that you look to accomplish as Jordan Leavitt, not as the fighter, but as the human being as we close out 2023 out strong?
It's really weird because I'm only 28, but like I've been involved in this sport for 13 years. And for me, like especially since I've been injured, like the theme and like the goal has been to like give back to the community, to give back to those that like I think need help, need direction. Like I've been kind of doing my own thing at the UFCPI drilling. I have my own drill group for the past 8 months or so. So people have been coming in and coming out. And it's just been really cool to kind of like, even, you know, I'm still growing, but I still have a lot of wisdom to share with people that are coming up, and being a part of their fight camps and being a part of their corners and helping them develop has brought a lot of purpose to me, purpose for me when I've been injured, especially. And it made me think like, maybe after I retire, I might coach. I might still want to be around the sport and be helpful and to be an influence on the sport. Because like, I just truly believe like this sport is really vicious and there's a lot of darkness to it. And I don't think a lot of like, I don't want like to like a lot of good people don't want to like be vulnerable and put themselves out there to help people. Because like, oh, I survived it, you should have to survive it. I want the sport to be a better place because of me. And you know, I haven't accomplished too much, you know, but I just I want to be able to look back on the whole fight thing and be like, yeah, I helped me, I helped my family, I had a good influence on the sport, but I also want to be able to look at the next generation of fighters and be like, and I helped them change their lives too, and I helped them build a life for themselves. So for, like my goal is just to be present for other people while I can't be focusing on myself for the fight camps. Read some good books, welcome a new child to the world, hopefully before the end of the year. And yeah. 2023 is gonna be a great year.
Absolutely. And I think with the win in the beginning of the year and just the sentiment that you share now, obviously, of helping others, I have no doubt that you're going to transform the fight game with your presence within it. I mean, you already have done so. So, I mean, only continuing to build on what you've done thus far as a fighter. I look forward to watching it. And I guess just a final question, just out of personal interest, what's the what's the best book that you're reading right now, and what's the best video game that you might be playing right now when you're unwinding from all the chaos that the world has to bring?
Oh, the best book I'm reading right now. So right now I'm reading like the Wheel of Time series, which is like a massive 15 book, 4.4 million words. I'm on the fifth installment of it. It's just a masterful story that I'm not even halfway done with. I'm reading it for 2 years, but like best story book series I'm reading right now by far. There's no comparison. And best video game, I'm like playing like a dozen at this moment, but I'm actually back to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, like the
Phenomenal,
Assassin's Creed
phenomenal game.
franchise. Huh?
I'm like phenomenal game. Like, I mean, the Edward Kenway story is just amazing. Best installment in the
Yeah,
franchise, in my opinion.
it's really dang good. And who doesn't like to be a pirate? So like that's been the video game I've been focused on the past month or so, almost done with it. But yeah, Wheel of Time, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. That's how I've been passing the time when I'm not being a dad, reading, and training. So
I mean, you look like an assassin right now. You know, obviously, with the mystique of it, you look like you could be in, fighting against the Templars right now. But thank you so much, Jordan, for your time and for the opportunity just to speak with you, man. I mean, I always like to thank the fighters for the sense of perspective that I get from speaking with them, and I wanted to thank you for that first and foremost. And then, just any final message to the fans at home?
um, thank you for having me. It's been a really nice interview. I have a lot of them. Oftentimes they're not enjoyed, but I very much enjoyed this one. And I guess any message to leave on, let your freak flag fly. Be yourself, because the authentic you will be the best you, and people that love you will still love you regardless, and people that hate you will hate you no matter how you act. Just be yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you so much, Jordan, for your time. And to the fans at home watching, do be sure to check out Jordan Leavitt on social media. In my opinion, one of the most personable fighters in this sport right now. Truly somebody who is a man of the people and somebody who doesn't shy away from being his true self. So do be sure to check him out on social media and drop a comment if you want to see maybe a Let's Play or a gameplay with me and Jordan. Maybe we run a video game fight sometime very soon. But yeah, it's been me, Dan, from FightWave, guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this interview. Do be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and have a great day, guys.